In the 1920s, a new wave of nativism swept across the United States. What is nativism? What were the results of this movement? The United States has long had a history of being distrustful of immigrants. The term was used to describe those who descended from the original 13 colonies, rather than referring to Native Americans as the term native would be used today. Following World War I, nativists turned their focus towards Southern and Eastern European immigrants, specifically those coming from Poland, the Balkans, and the region near the Mediterranean Sea. Many of the immigrants coming from these regions were Catholic or Jewish, which nativists were also opposed to. Nativists had several different arguments for opposing immigration. Some feared that an influx of unskilled laborers would take jobs away from Americans. Others believed that the nation's genetic and racial purity was being damaged by what they believed were inferior races from these Eastern European nations. The Immigration Act did not completely stop the flow of immigrants coming into the United States, but instead reduced the number considerably.
Latin Americans, Mexicans if you will, Hispanics, like these people, were also sent packing with their meager collection of goods, not looking for work or a new start. Their fate was complicated by a policy set into effect by the Hoover administration and continued under the Roosevelt administration, where the United States government rounded up between 1/4 and 1/3 of a million, mostly Mexican but Hispanic Americans, many of whom had been born in the United States, and collected them, sent them to bordered areas, put them on trains and buses, and sent them, quote, back home to Mexico, as we see in this scene from Los Angeles. There were several problems with this. Not only were, as I said, many of the people actually American citizens, many were rounded up in the night. They were given no chance to take any paperwork with them. They couldn't easily prove their nationality, but many of the children spoke no Spanish. They would arrive typically in Mexico without any family structures intact from the parents' emigration years before, or their grandparents or great-grandparents' emigration, and they had no land. And so just as many would have been living on the margins of society in the United States, now they were in Mexico living in shanties and on marginal land.
I'm Jan Jarbo Russell. This is History in 5. I'm here to tell you 5 things you need to know about FDR's secret enemy exchange program. On September 1, 1939, the day before German tanks invaded Poland, Roosevelt created a top secret division within the Department of State called the Special War Problems Division, to identify American civilians, prisoners of war, businessmen, journalists, missionaries, who would be in danger in the event of war. Roosevelt authorized the Special Division to create a pool of Japanese, German, and Italian enemy aliens and their families who could be used for prisoner exchange for Americans in Europe and the Far East, many of them drawn from the thousands of internees in the Crystal City internment camp. The camp in Crystal City was at the center of the exchanges. Some of the former internees refer to it today as the kidnap camp. From 1942 to 1948, secret government trains delivered enemy alien fathers and their completely innocent wives and children to the small, dusty town in South Texas, as close to Siberia as we have in the United States. The camp, administered by the INS, had 2 purposes, a humanitarian one and a political one. It was created to unite families who had been separated when their fathers were arrested. It was the only family camp during the war. It had schools, churches, sports fields, a beer hall for the German internees, acres of farmland maintained by the Japanese and the Germans. It functioned as a tiny town, but the internees lived behind 10-foot-high barbed wire fences. None of the enemy alien fathers who were arrested were ever charged with any crime. They had hearings before an alien hearing board that lasted about 15 minutes or less, and then they were interned. The Special Division organized the exchanges from Crystal City. By circumstance, many of the children who were exchanged into war in Germany and Japan were American citizens. Their fathers were born in Germany and Japan, and the children had no choice but to go with their parents into war. More than 1 million immigrants and their families who were of German, Japanese, and Italian ancestries were caught up in the hunt for enemies at home.
Service of the United States Department of Justice was responsible for the detention and supervision of all civilian alien enemies. Women of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, in dealing with aliens of all nationalities, made possible the efficient functioning of the program. The filming of the Crystal City facility, which you are about to see, shows how men, women, and children, detainees of World War II, lived, worked, and played under traditional American standards of decent and humane treatment.
Here is a party of women and children arriving in Crystal City, following their voluntary decision to join husbands and fathers in detention. Practically all the children and many women were American-born. A welcoming committee and band music. New arrivals and their baggage were examined by inspectors and matrons. Be safe, and detainees given receipts. Following the admission procedure, they were fed in the central mess. They were then escorted to quarters which had been assigned in advance of their arrival. The sun shines practically every day in the year, with a cool breeze from the Gulf in the evening. Originally, it was a migratory labor camp of approximately 100 housing units, utility and recreation buildings. To provide for a population of 3,600, we added more than 500 housing units, school buildings, a hospital, administrative and maintenance buildings. We tripled the number of streets and extended electric and sewage facilities. This is the perimeter over which armed guards kept a 24-hour watch. At night, the illumination from the lights along the top of this fence was visible almost to the Mexican border. Both groups cultivated flowers with great pride. Seeds were purchased by them with their own money. They also paid for and built the screen porches you see. For such items, which were considered morale builders, they could draw on their personal funds. Each housing unit was furnished with running water, an ice box, beds and linen, chairs, and some with toilet facilities. Community showers and latrines were located throughout the area. People who had to be isolated for medical purposes were placed in cottages like this, which were equipped with modern conveniences. There were about 50 of these in the area. This is one of the community bathhouses. This is the way the houses appeared before the detainees made homes out of them. There are the central administration buildings. Supervised repatriation movements, investigations, releases and paroles, allocated housing. Another important office was supply and procurement. Foodstuffs were checked into the supply warehouse and then rationed according to a formula based upon the normal needs and size of the family. Detainees were issued plastic money each month with which they could purchase these foodstuffs in the facility store. The system was economical and practical, as it was. Here is the mail truck being checked in. Used for security purposes, few limitations were placed upon the number of letters which could be sent or received. Mail was delivered to the Internal Security Office, where it was examined by German, Spanish, and Japanese censors. The daily milk delivery. At one time, there were 1,600 minor children in detention. 2,500 quarts of milk were required each day. The grounds. There are the public health medical officer and head nurse. Ills were often imaginary, traceable to detention, the fence, the loss of freedom. As many as 60 patients were treated daily in the clinic. Japanese and German girls who were trained by the public health nurses as aides were faithful and dependable helpers. Young America. About 250 Americans were born in this hospital. This is the operating room. There were 5 detainee doctors in the facility, 2 of whom were Japanese women. Detainees exchanging the latest rumors and making calls. This is the German Recreation Center. There was a small cafe in this building called the Vaterland, where they enjoyed music furnished by their own orchestra. The kindergarten was at one end of this building. Here are some children at play under the direction of a detainee teacher. Here is the American Grammar and High School, which was accredited by the Texas State Board of Education. Many graduates from this high school went on to college following their release from detention. The Japanese required their children to attend the American school in the morning and the Japanese school in the afternoon. There is the Japanese school. Directly in back of those children is the Japanese Recreation Center. Carefully selected movies were shown each week in the 2 recreation halls. This swimming pool was originally an irrigation tank for the farm. Seepage of water in the vicinity of the tank caused mud holes and unsanitary conditions. So it was necessary to wall it in with concrete. This was done by the detainees at a cost to the government of about $2,500. This tank was not only of vital importance to the farm for irrigation purposes and essential to hygiene and sanitation, but it helped greatly to relieve the monotony of detention for teenagers and adults, and as you see, it was particularly beneficial to the children.